thank you very much. We're here today to talk about the Albertsons Kroger merger coming together and all the issues that is going to happen for so many brands, specifically on the negotiation front. I'm so fortunate to know Christine, and we've worked together for a long time, and I've known you for multiple years, and I know how talented you are in negotiation. So I understand, having been in this business for almost 40 years, how this is going to how it's played out in the past, what's going to happen for brands and vendors that are working with both Kroger and Albertsons, and also potential new vendors. All of the opportunities that are about to happen for brands for communications, discussion of contracts, and negotiations. And there's so many nuances to this. There's going to be the post FTC distribution centers. It's just so much involved. And I wanted to thank you so much for being here to talk to us and just discuss negotiations and some best practices, also dealing with contracts, because I know you and I, we've been going over a lot of the information together. So thank you so much for being here at timforce.com, Christine.
Tim, it's always an honor to get to spend time with you. I always love our conversations, and this topic is just huge. This is big on so many different levels, and I'm really excited to talk about it.
It is big, and it's a lot involved. When you think of the numbers, there's almost 5,000 stores involved.
Yeah,
on distribution. I know the press release listed 66 distribution centers with 52 manufacturing plants, and so that means there's agreements, there's contracts, there's pricing from both teams, Albertsons and Kroger, that likely, if they're both if a brand is serving both accounts, which is very likely for so many, there's so many issues that it just kind of doubles the complexity of the situation.
Well, and it makes it, what makes it exacerbates the challenge is that both of these companies historically, they're used to dealing with actually a small, they have tons of different suppliers and different providers of food products, but the bulk of their business comes from 8 or 9 major suppliers. Right.
Yes.
Even in the organic category, you have huge consolidation under one supplier. And when you've got 2 big companies, right? So you got now theoretically the merged Kroger Albertsons, and then you're dealing with, Nestle, right? You've got certain things that you can expect with working with another really humongous organization. But if you're a smaller brand, how do you stay profitable and minimize your risk when Albertsons, Kroger Albertsons, however they're going to change their name, pushes, they're going to increase their pricing pressure, and then they're going to try to continue to push more risk. They don't have strong diversity programs. They don't have strong programs about introducing new locally sourced products, which a lot of smaller food vendors or food producers deliver. And so there's some huge challenges, but there's some huge opportunities. Whenever you have one of these situations happen, you can look at it on either side of the coin, either that it's going to be absolutely awful, or that there's huge opportunity, and if you can figure out how to rise to the occasion, you have the opportunity to do some amazing things.
Exactly. And so that's one of the things. If you have teams, so one of the key points, if you're managing a team or you are a part of a team that's calling on Kroger and or Albertsons and or both, you want to stay focused on your mission. Your mission as a brand, and you want to execute at the market level as precisely and as awesome as you possibly can at this time, so that you're bringing value to whichever team. Also communication, and let's talk about the communication piece. One of the things that's going to happen, this has happened to me in the past, you're going to have Kroger buyers or Albertsons team members asking you, what are your teams at the other hearing? What are you hearing through the grapevine? Not to mention all the others. How would you answer questions like that, or what feedback do you have as far as this communication piece?
Well, it's kind of, kind of twofold. The first thing, that if I were somebody who had products that I was selling into either one or both of these behemoth organizations, I would get my own ducks in a row. I'd want to determine what do I bring to the table? What are my gaps? What are my gaps in servicing a larger company? If you're somebody who doesn't service, let's say you do not service Amazon or Walmart, right? So you're not with the two bigger companies. And let's just be clear that even this merger, it still makes this combined entity a fraction of what Walmart is in the market, right? But you've got to understand, you've got to spend some time really understanding who you are, what you bring to the table, what you are capable of doing today, where you're trying to go, what gaps you might have in servicing a large entity like the combined entity we're talking about. But in terms of the communication, I mean, one of the first things you need to do is go back to, people need to go to their contract. Now, Kroger, I took some time and I went and looked at Kroger's standard vendor agreement from 2017, assuming that most people, that's the contract they're operating under. And the vendor cannot assign the contract, but the contract is silent on whether Kroger can assign it. But they reference the ability to have permissible assigns. So they theoretically should be able to assign whatever agreement you have, which means that if you've got volume purchasing pricing in there and their volume just increased astronomically through the merger with Albertsons, they're going to try to take whatever price, if you happen to do business with both, they'll take whatever price is the better price and say you don't have an opportunity to negotiate that. Make sure that you are not listening when they say, I don't, or I won't, or they talk in those definitive terms. You want to get really good in these situations about asking questions, because as a result of this merger, they are going to have problems. They're going to have problems that are going to be supply chain problems. They're going to have inventory issues. They are going to have problems. And especially as a small manufacturer, small producer, you want to understand what are those problems that they are going to have as a result of this merger, and how can you fit in and slot in to help solve some of them, because that's where your value add is going to be. So instead of going in and telling them about things, you want to go in and ask, so that you can start to figure out and what's going on in that communication. Be super open and super curious about what happens on each side of that equation, so that you can figure out what those effective questions are and figure out how you're going to play in that sandbox.
How do you recommend, if you have two separate teams that have negotiated agreements that are not the same agreements, and when you think about the investments, marketing investments with the different retailers in the different markets, they're going to be different. So how do you as a company get your house in, how do you recommend someone as a company get their house in order to understand what their Albertsons relationship looks like along with their Kroger relationship?
So the first thing is you absolutely combine the teams and get the teams to come together. You start talking about, first of all, you get anecdotal information. Tell me about the relationship. Start with the relationship. How good is it? Who are the people? Let's build a little bit of a dossier on the individuals. Not all of them are going to survive the merger, especially from a buyer perspective. They'll consolidate and some of the buyers will go away wherever, I don't know where their product, they might have stronger buyers in one company or the other in different categories, but you want to anticipate that. Who do you think is going to be staying around? Who do you think's on the chopping block, because they're going to lose some of those people? And you want to start to build a framework for what the organization at the combined entity is going to look like, and who are your best people for addressing that organization, right? Kind of the culture, the style. And then you want to do a side-by-side comparison of the contracts. And I do mean a side-by-side comparison. You want to look at, I mean, for example, I know Kroger tried to increase their payment terms a few years ago, and which went over badly, but ultimately that's where they're going. They're trying to move everybody to longer term, 90-day. They're going to try to move you to 120-day pay period. I guarantee it's coming. It's what's Albertsons doing? What are the favorable terms, right? So you want to anticipate what are the favorable terms in the contract that exist today in the two agreements that you have. You want to document those. Which ones do you want to keep? Which ones do you think you're not likely to keep that the combined entity is going to try to get rid of, like extending payment terms out longer? And are they going to do that now? Are they going to do that later? One of the things I didn't see in the Kroger agreement was whether or not they could unilaterally change terms of the contract without getting providing notification or the time period. I didn't have the time to get into it as deeply as I wanted to, but there's some juicy stuff in the contracts. So you want to start with the people, because the people in the merged entity are scared right now, right?
Yep.
It's a good time to kind of come into building that relationship in that fear moment, because in any large scale merger, people are worrying about their jobs, right? You want to start to and they also tend to talk more freely. So you want to figure out what the two companies are saying, what those relationships are, anticipate that, do a side-by-side comparison of the contracts, figure out what terms are favorable, what terms are not favorable. And if you were able to renegotiate it again, where would you really want to be? So you have that picture. And then you want to start to develop, what's my strategy for approaching, because if you have an unfavorable contract, you want to try to use this as an opportunity to re-examine your relationship with them and open it up for discussion.
And I know, working with you, Christine, that this is a lot more than just the contract. And so there's 66 distribution centers involved. There's almost 5,000 stores. So there's going to be, there's going to be inventory issues. There's going to be potential opportunities. There's going to be either supply chain issues, or there's going to be discontinuing a product in certain DCs. So there may be asking you to take product back. And so all of this needs to be brought to the table and thought about ahead of time, so that you're not giving away anything in the negotiation, and then all of a sudden they're going to come back 60 days from now and say, oh, by the way, we've got 36 truckloads of product over here in these 8 DCs that we're closing. And so
absolutely. I mean, the thing is when I say you want to understand who you are, what you do, what your capabilities are, and what your gaps are, that encompasses a bunch of different things, because there are really kind of 5 risks in these kind of relationships, and really only 5. One is legal risk, which that I'm not qualified to comment on legal risks, since I'm not an attorney. But the other 4 are business related. What's the cash flow risk? What implications exist for your ability to get cash into your system, into your business, right? Kroger, when they announced in 2018 that they were extending payment terms, talked about evening out their cash flow and improving their working capital position. But if you're a smaller producer and a smaller manufacturer, that's an even bigger worry for you. How do you deal with that? What's your plan and strategy around managing cash flow? What's profitability look like? That may sound like it's a little bit different, but are the same, but it's not. It's very different. You might be willing to take cash flow hits and take a longer payment cycle if you're getting a higher margin for the product that you are selling to them. But what's that strategy? And embedded in that profitability is operational risk, right? Operationally, which goes to the distribution centers, their manufacturing plants, everything. You look at the West Coast in particular, where there's massive amounts of overlap of where they have stores in markets, and in many markets they are the only 2 dominant players. And we have huge food deserts. I happen to be in Los Angeles. We have huge food deserts. California, not a business-friendly state. There are 600 stores in California. It is highly likely that in order for the merger to go through, that they will have to divest of some of those. And they actually announced in their press release that they're willing to divest over 600 stores. What does that mean operationally for you? In terms of what you just said, in terms of, do I have to take back the inventory? Are you prepared for that? What happens if how does that get compensated, right? That creates a whole nightmare of issues potentially for you if you're not prepared for it. So, and then you've got strategic risk, right? What does the consolidation of these two companies mean for your strategy, right? If you had the majority of your revenue is coming from one or both of these, right now, your revenue risk is much higher. And how do you start to expand your network of companies that you're selling to in order to diversify that portfolio to minimize your risk? Because like I said before, this combined, and it's always been this way, that these two companies, just like Walmart, Target, Costco, there's price pressure and there's risk pressure. So they want to push as much risk down to you as possible, while at the same time hammering you on price. And the hard job is figuring out, how do you find that balance? And to do it, you have to have a holistic view of what you are able to do today, what you're not capable of doing today, and what you're willing and able to do in the future and not willing and able to do. And that's a deep exercise that a lot of businesses are not going to be going through. And so what will happen to them is that Kroger, I grew up in a farming and ranching community, and all I can think of is the bull with the ring in his nose and the bulldog just hanging on to it. And the merged entity will take you, if you're not prepared, they'll take you wherever the hell they want to take you.
We've been talking about a lot of the issues and pressures with the merger. If you had three to five best practices, in a nutshell, what sort of guidelines or suggestions would you provide going into this situation?
The first thing would be to spend a massive amount of effort assessing the situation, figuring out the you part, the them part, and the it part. Because, in the food industry, you've got a lot of external factors that are impacting this deal, which means they are either directly or indirectly going to impact the people who are listening to this show, right? And what does that look like? And you need to spend 70 to 80% of your time preparing to have this conversation. The second thing is, don't get tricked into thinking that you know how they're going to behave as a combined entity. And don't get tricked into thinking, to letting yourself think, oh, they won't be willing to do this, because you have no idea. So be willing to ask what you think are crazy questions. Be willing to ask for what you want. When you're really assessing that, when you spend a lot of time assessing and you have the data and the analysis to support what you think you're going to ask for, then don't be afraid to ask for it. Ask for it. I often say that the hardest part of every negotiation happens right between our ears, because we convince ourselves what we are able and not able to do before we've ever even engaged with our counterpart. So don't fall into the trap of doing that, because you are going to be your worst enemy in this situation, because there's fear that comes up with this kind of situation. Acknowledge that it's big and scary and it's uncomfortable, but it's okay. You're going to be okay, right? And don't fall into the trap of, oh my God, if I push, they're going to walk away from me. They're going to tell me to go pound sand. You don't know that until you actually ask. And once you ask, and if they do say no, ask them, what specifically are you saying no to? Because they're probably not saying no to the whole of what you're asking. It's some part of it. So really be curious in your asking, and then take action. Make sure that you are taking action in a way that allows you to continue to gather evidence about what's working and is effective or ineffective about the relationship as you go forward, and make sure that you're putting renegotiation points, that you're not left holding the bag if they screw up, that you're not left holding all the cost and all the risk if regulators come in and say, no, you've got to do this, and it directly impacts you. So you have, in these situations, I've done lots of these really, really big deals, and I've been on the buying side and the merger side, and they're complicated, and trust me, they're freaked out. Every person who works for either of these companies is completely freaking out right now, except for the senior executive team, who knows already whether they live or they're going away. They're the only ones who have security in this situation. Everybody else is freaking out, right? And so it's a scary time for everybody. But if you manage it effectively, you can be hugely successful in this situation.
Do you have any opinion about post FTC, or how the FTC decision, once it's all finalized, or when all that comes down, everything, they're ready to go forward and or close stores, which stores are gonna happen, and they're going to begin their final marching orders to what the final entity is going to look like? Do you have any comments there?
So, I mean, the big thing is one, these things take time. It's not an overnight ruling that they have to close stores. This is not happening tomorrow. This is not happening tomorrow, right? It's not let's say the FTC comes back and says you have to close stores. They probably will have time, right? They have to divest of stores in a certain amount of time, right?
Right.
We're turning massive ships here. We're not in little razor sailfish or funfish razor boats. So we're not turning real fast. We got big behemoths that are turning, and there's risk associated with that. And to be honest, the regulators know that. They respect that, right? It took a long time for AT&T to be broken up, right? And it took less time for it to reconsolidate in some areas, right? So that's part of really assessing the of the situation. If you're a small producer, small manufacturer, you should be spending time understanding, where's the FTC today? What happens if the FTC, if in 2 years the FTC, we have more conservative leadership in the FTC? You have to have some opinions about these things, because those external factors impact what you think you can do and what you think you want to do going forward. So, if you're listening to this and you are, you're smaller and you're just getting started and just getting kind of your feet under your sea legs, so to speak, you still need to be studying the regulatory bodies. And you need, especially in this deal, you really need to look at Washington, Oregon, and California, because that's where the bulk of the regulation issues, I think, are going to be, in looking at the map of stores.
Also, Christine, I want to share, because I share this all the time. So much of the value that brands offer is their connection to shoppers and consumers, and it's very important they understand the strength of their brand and the strength of their company, regardless of their size, because that's what they're bringing to Kroger and Albertsons in value, is that consumer shopper component. As far as all these brands are doing a job for consumers, and the better that the teams understand that and can communicate that, I think that's much stronger it's going to play for them in any discussion of the negotiations, any of the issues with authorizations, listings, and or delistings, all of
Yep.
that. they need to be very well versed and understand and be able to convey their position in the markets, with their consumers.
Absolutely. And to be nimble, right? One of
Yeah,
the benefits of being a smaller entity is that you can be nimble. And,
yes,
but you want to make sure you're managing your nimbleness relative to your profitability too.
yep,
But be nimble, and you can only do that if you're prepared, if you've thought
yes.
it through and you know what you're willing to do. Otherwise,
Christine, this has been so exciting, and your insights have been awesome. And just to think through, wow, the amount of time that we need to put into preparing, I agree with you so much, and it's been very helpful. If people wanted to reach out to you or talk more before we, if they wanted to reach out to you before we our closing comments, how would they reach out? Where can they find you, Christine?
so
Can you help them? Can you help them through this process?
yeah, I'd be happy to talk to them about the contract that they have, help them think through the strategy for how they're going to, position themselves in a different way. I'd love to have those conversations. And the easiest way to find me, so I'm on LinkedIn, but the easiest way is to go to my website and which is Venn, VENN negotiation.com. So and it's 3 N's in a row. So I'm big into three circle Venn diagram. Venn, yeah, it's the thing. So Venn negotiation.com, or look me up on LinkedIn, and you could just find me under Christine McKay there.
Great, and I'll put the links down below so they can get there. And if you have a question, or you can send me a note as well, tim@timforce.com, and I can connect you with Christine as well. Thank you so much, Christine. There's so much is going on here in this space with the merger. Do you have any other last comments or anything that we haven't talked about you think we should jump into or discuss?
I think the big thing is just don't let fear drive your behavior in this situation. Don't let fear drive your behavior. Acknowledge if you're nervous about it, uncomfortable about it, if there's there's going to be risk to you, but don't let it paralyze you, and don't let it drive an unwillingness to open a conversation, because negotiation is simply a conversation about a relationship, and you already have a relationship with one or both of these entities, and all you're trying to do is improve the quality of that conversation to build a long-term relationship with this new combined entity.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christine. I
Thank
appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you too. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome.